You know that feeling when you've got this sense of untapped potential, maybe good intentions buzzing around, but you're just static.
Hmm.
Like the life you envision, full of purpose and direction, it feels just out of reach and you can't quite figure out how to get there.
Yeah, it's a really common crossroads, that feeling, that gap between what we hope for and, our current reality.
Needs its sound. Yeah.
Often it signals that we really need to look at things in a more integrated way.
Right. And that's pretty much the focus of our deep dive today. We're calling it Designing with Insight. Now,
Okay.
that might sound a bit, I don't know, structured, but it's really about how we bring together our inner compass, that sense of what's truly important to us, with solid real-world information.
Yeah, it's not an either thing at all.
No, it's about the powerful synergy, when your deepest values and actual information kind of point you in the same direction.
Precisely. Think of it like an architect. They don't just dream up a beautiful building. Right? They need blueprints.
Right.
They absolutely need to understand the site, the regulations, the materials.
All the practical stuff.
Exactly. The vision is crucial, of course, but it's the practical details, the data, that allow it to actually become a real structure.
That's a brilliant analogy. It really is. And it brings to mind Proverbs 16.9. The heart of man plans his way, but the Lord establishes his steps.
Mhm.
It's not saying don't plan. I think sometimes people read it that way. It's about planning thoughtfully, but also holding those plans maybe with an open hand, recognizing there's a larger guidance at play.
It really highlights that dynamic partnership, doesn't it? Between our
Yes.
own initiative and, well, a broader sense of purpose.
Yeah.
We have a responsibility to, chart our course, but also to be open to insights that go beyond just our immediate view. This process we're exploring, this spiritual calibration, it involves prayer, sure, but also self-reflection and really seeking alignment with your deeper beliefs, your purpose.
So if you're feeling kind of bogged down by all the shoulds and the hows, this deep dive into our sources is definitely for you. We're going to explore how to break through that stuckness and move towards clear, actionable steps, all grounded in this principle of designing with insight.
And the essential first step in any design process, really, is having a clear understanding of what you're aiming for, the desired outcome.
Okay, let's unpack this then. When we talk about growth in this specific context, what does that truly mean? It's definitely more than just like hitting milestones on a checklist, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Growth, as our sources lay it out, is really more of a multifaceted journey. It's about becoming the most complete version of yourself, the person you were created to be.
Okay.
It's not just about reaching some final destination, but about the continuous development across lots of different aspects of your life.
So it's not just about climbing the career ladder, for instance.
Not at all. The material we've looked at really emphasizes a holistic sense of flourishing. That includes things like your professional calling, finding work that genuinely resonates with your talents, your values, seeing it as a meaningful contribution.
Right. Purpose and work.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Then there's the ongoing development of your skills to, enhance that contribution. Financial stewardship is also
Yeah.
key. Managing resources responsibly.
Okay.
And even nurturing your creative gifts. That falls into this bigger picture too.
Wow. Okay. That's a much wider lens than I might have initially thought. It's about way more than just your job.
It really is. It also covers things like relational health, those vital, supportive connections with other people, and spiritual maturity, deepening that connection with the divine. All these areas, they're interconnected. They all contribute to overall well-being.
For this deep dive, though, we're really zooming in on that professional calling and skill development piece, aren't we? That kind of underlying desire for work with meaning and that constant drive to learn and improve.
Precisely. Our sources strongly suggest that for many people, this longing for purposeful work and, continuous growth is a really fundamental motivator.
Yeah.
It's often right at the heart of that frustrating feeling of being stuck.
Yeah. Okay. So we're getting a clearer picture of what growth could look like. But what about the things that stop us? What are the actual barriers that prevent us from moving forward? These deep-seated roadblocks that keep us feeling like we're just, running in place.
Well, that feeling of being stuck rarely just appears out of nowhere. There are usually underlying reasons. Our sources point to several key obstacles, both internal and external, that commonly affect our professional path and skill development.
Let's start by looking inward then at those psychological barriers. What's going on in our own heads that tends to trip us up?
Okay. A really significant internal barrier is the fear of failure. That hesitation, that reluctance to step out and try something new because you're worried about not succeeding. What's insightful here, I think, is understanding that this fear isn't just about the outcome itself. It's often rooted much deeper in a misbelief about your inherent worth, like this false idea that your value as a person is somehow tied to your performance.
Ah, that's a powerful point. So, if we believe our actual worth is on the line with every single attempt, then taking any kind of risk feels incredibly threatening. How does that actually play out in our behavior?
Well, it often shows up as procrastination, right?
Yeah.
Putting off challenging tasks basically forever, or even self-sabotage, unconsciously acting in ways that actually undermine our own goals.
Ouch, yeah. I can definitely see aspects of that. What other internal hurdles do we tend to face?
Another really prevalent one is imposter syndrome. That secret fear of being inadequate, of being exposed as a fraud, even when there's actual evidence of our competence.
Right.
It often seems to stem from internalizing external expectations and just feeling like you haven't really earned your successes.
Mm, that feeling of constantly waiting to be found out, even if you have the qualifications. How does that hold us back?
Oh, it could be incredibly limiting. It stops us from going for new opportunities, from speaking up, from truly owning our achievements.
Yeah.
We tend to downplay our successes and are just plagued by this persistent self-doubt.
That sounds exhausting, honestly. And then there's analysis paralysis. I am very familiar with that one. Getting so caught up in researching and planning that you never actually do anything.
Exactly. It's often driven by perfectionism, isn't it? And an underlying fear of making the wrong choice.
Yeah.
So we get trapped in this endless cycle of gathering information, overthinking every single possible scenario, and ultimately just becoming unable to make a decision. We're stuck.
Okay, so those are some of the internal battles. What about the practical limitations? The stuff we might encounter in the real world?
Right, the tangible constraints. One big one is simply a lack of resources. This could be financial limitations, maybe a lack of the right professional connections, or lacking specific skills you need for a path you want to pursue.
Uh-huh.
This can easily lead to a feeling of helplessness, like
Uh-huh.
our options are just completely out of reach.
Yes, it's definitely challenging to pursue something new if you genuinely lack the money or the skills needed right now.
Another practical hurdle is having unclear priorities. If we haven't really taken the time to define what matters most to us, what truly aligns with our core values, we can end up chasing paths that don't actually lead to fulfillment.
So we might be keeping busy, constantly doing things, but we still feel this sense of emptiness underneath it all.
Precisely. This often results in a scattered focus and just an overarching feeling of dissatisfaction. And then, related to that, there are inefficient work habits, poor time management, disorganization in our workflows.
That constant sensation of being busy, 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 but not actually accomplishing anything substantial, like spinning your wheels.
Exactly that. It just drains our energy and hinders our progress, leading to frustration and a real lack of a sense of achievement.
Okay, we've looked inside, we've looked at the practical challenges. Now, what about our surroundings? How does our environment influence this feeling of being stuck?
Oh, our environment can have a massive effect.
Yeah.
An unsupportive environment, for instance,
Yeah.
where the people around you are critical or discouraging,
Mm-hmm.
that can be incredibly demotivating. It can lead to feelings of isolation, negativity.
Yeah, it's really hard to maintain momentum when you feel like the people closest to you don't believe in what you're trying to do.
Absolutely. And similarly, a lack of mentorship, not having experienced people to offer guidance and support, it can leave us feeling lost
Mm-hmm.
and maybe prone to making mistakes that could have been avoided with just a bit of direction.
So it's not just about our individual efforts, but also about the support systems or lack thereof that we have around us. Okay, finally, let's touch on motivation itself. What motivational factors can contribute to feeling stuck?
A major one that comes up is burnout.
Hmm.
That state of just complete emotional and physical exhaustion that makes it incredibly difficult to even think about pursuing goals. It often shows up as cynicism, detachment, a complete lack of enthusiasm for things you maybe once really cared about.
When you're simply running on fumes, it's almost impossible to find the energy for anything new or challenging.
Exactly. And then linked to what we said earlier, there's a disconnect from our values.
Hmm.
If we feel that our work lacks meaning or doesn't align with what we deeply believe in, it can really lead to apathy, a sense of disengagement. We lose that intrinsic motivation, that internal drive that usually pushes us forward.
Okay, so we've got a pretty comprehensive overview now of the roadblocks: internal, external, practical, motivational. Now, what's the roadmap forward? How do we actually begin to create change and get unstuck?
Well, the key insight from the sources is to approach this not as some sudden dramatic overhaul, but as a gradual process, something built on small, consistent actions.
Okay.
Our sources really emphasize that it's an ongoing cycle, one that thoughtfully integrates both spiritual reflection and practical, data-informed decisions. It's about establishing a sustainable rhythm, not just following some one-time plan.
Okay, so where do we actually begin? What's the very first phase of this action plan look like?
So phase one is centered on assessment and that spiritual alignment piece.
Hmm.
We call it the data and discernment phase. And it's really designed to take place over the first couple of weeks.
Weeks 1 and 2.
Right. The main goal here is to gather relevant information about yourself and your situation, and also to seek that spiritual insight to help guide your direction.
Got it. So what are the first tangible steps we can take, those micro wins you mentioned for these initial 2 weeks?
Okay, so in week one, the first micro win is to conduct a really thorough skills audit. This basically involves making a detailed list of your current skills, what you can actually do, and then identifying any gaps that might exist related to where you want to go professionally.
Let's list the skills, find the gaps.
Exactly. Concurrently, you'll do a values clarification exercise, creating a list of your core values, what's fundamentally important to you. The crucial connection here is to then consciously consider how your existing skills can be applied in ways that actively reflect and support those core values you just identified.
I really appreciate that connection. It's not just about listing what you can do, but thinking intentionally about how those abilities align with who you are fundamentally. What's the second micro win then for week 2?
In week 2, the task is to identify just one single key data point that's relevant to your desired fields or area of growth.
Just one.
Just one to start. This could be anything, really, maybe current industry trends, emerging technologies, specific insights from a job market analysis, or even just information about successful people in that field. What are they doing?
Okay.
Following this bit of data gathering, the crucial next step is to dedicate just 15 minutes to prayerful reflection, specifically asking for insights and guidance related to that piece of information you found.
That's a really compelling combination, grounding your spiritual seeking in something tangible, some real-world information. I like that.
Yeah, and our sources reinforce this idea that our abilities, our talents, they are gifts, right? As highlighted in Ephesians 4.11212, they're intended to be used for a purpose that goes beyond just ourselves. And to support this whole phase, we offer a powerful affirmation you can use. I am a capable and resourceful individual, equipped to pursue my calling with wisdom and discernment, guided by the Holy Spirit.
That provides a really strong foundation, doesn't it? Okay, so after this initial phase of assessment and alignment, what comes next in the plan?
Phase 2. This spans weeks 3 through 8, roughly. And it's really about developing a strategic blueprint and establishing sustainable daily and weekly rhythms.
Okay, building the framework.
Exactly. This is the phase where we directly start to address those common roadblocks we talked about earlier, the fear, the paralysis, the lack of resources.
So how do we start to overcome that analysis paralysis and that underlying fear of failure during this phase? What's the action step?
So the micro win for week 3 directly tackles this. It involves drafting one specific strategic goal, just one that is clearly informed by the data and discernment you did in phase 1.
Okay, one goal based on the initial work.
Right. But the critical element here is to then break that goal down into the absolute smallest, most manageable action step you can possibly identify. Ridiculously small.
So instead of setting a goal like launch my side business, the first step might be brainstorm 5 potential names for 15 minutes.
Exactly. That level of small. The emphasis is totally on initiating momentum with an achievable first step. It gets you moving.
Makes sense.
This phase also strongly encourages actively reframing challenges. Don't see them as setbacks. See them as valuable learning opportunities. Keep a journal, maybe, record lessons learned from difficulties, and even better, share these insights with an accountability partner.
That helps shift the perspective on failure, doesn't it? From being this final judgment to just being part of the learning process.
Sure.
Okay, what about addressing the challenges of, say, limited resources or unclear priorities?
Right, so week 4 has a micro win, specifically focused on resources. Identify one low-cost or ideally freely available resource that can help you develop a key skill related to your goal.
Like an online course, a library book, a tutorial.
Exactly. And then schedule dedicated time within that week to actually use that resource. Block it out.
Okay.
And to address the issue of unclear priorities, we introduce the idea of gamification. Break your larger goals down into smaller, more easily tracked tasks. Maybe use a simple project management tool. There are lots of free ones to visualize your progress. And intentionally reward yourself when you complete those tasks.
Creating little wins along the way.
Precisely. It helps bring clarity to your focus and creates a tangible sense of forward movement, which feels good.
I like the idea of making it more engaging and visually clear. Okay, and how do we begin to address the big issues of burnout and that feeling of being disconnected from our core values?
Week 5 places a specific emphasis right there.
Mhm.
The micro win for this week is to consciously schedule non-negotiable time for rest, rejuvenation, and self-care.
Non-negotiable.
Non-negotiable. Frame these activities not as optional luxuries, but as truly essential components of a spiritual discipline that allows you to sustain your effort over the long haul.
Right, refueling is critical.
Absolutely. And to actively reconnect with your values, the suggestion is to craft a concise purpose statement, something short that clearly articulates how your work or your intended direction contributes to a larger meaning or purpose that really resonates with your core beliefs.
So it's about intentionally building in those moments of recharge and consciously reminding ourselves of the deeper why behind what we're doing. Okay. That leads us nicely into the final phase of this initial 12-week plan.
Right, phase 3. This extends from weeks 9 through 12 and really beyond that. It's all about putting things into consistent practice, making necessary adjustments as you go, and establishing a sustainable rhythm for long-term momentum. It's not just about the 12 weeks.
Okay, so maintaining it. What are the key elements for keeping this kind of ongoing progress alive?
Well, consistent accountability and having a supportive community are just paramount. Actively seeking out an accountability partner or becoming part of a like-minded group provides crucial support and really helps maintain focus.
Yeah, going it alone is tough.
It really is. Regularly reviewing the data you continue to gather because things change and being willing to adapt your strategies based on those insights is also essential. We actually suggest scheduling maybe a dedicated monthly strategy review for this purpose.
So it's definitely not a rigid set it and forget it kind of approach. We need to stay flexible and responsive to what's happening.
Exactly. And another vital element is celebrating your progress. Intentionally acknowledging even the small victories, sharing your successes, maybe with that accountability partner, with gratitude. It fuels you.
Recognizing how far you've come.
Yes. And finally, we just reiterate the importance of cultivating mindfulness in a consistent prayer life, maybe starting each day with just a short period of quiet reflection before diving into the tasks.
It sounds like it's really about creating the sustainable cycle, isn't it? That intentionally integrates both proactive action and thoughtful reflection. The practical steps working hand in hand with the spiritual grounding.
Precisely. It's about cultivating those specific habits that will keep you moving forward steadily, not in some state of frantic urgency, but with clear intention and guided by that informed insight we talked about.
So as we start to bring this deep dive to a close, what's the key takeaway message for someone listening right now who is currently feeling that sense of being stuck, maybe overwhelmed?
I think the main thing is that this journey toward living a life of purpose and growth, it really is an ongoing process. It's not a destination you arrive at.
Right.
It will require consistent effort, yes, and you will undoubtedly encounter challenges along the way. That's just part of it. However, the most important message, I believe, is that you are not navigating this in isolation, and you absolutely are empowered to take those initial crucial steps.
Those micro wins we discussed, starting with something really small feels so much less overwhelming, doesn't it?
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
And continually remembering that central principle of designing with insight, thoughtfully integrating your inner wisdom, your discernment with practical real-world information. And importantly, placing your trust and guidance as you actively pursue your calling.
It's a really powerful combination of perspectives when you put them together like that. Okay, so here's a final thought for you, the listener, to consider. Something to maybe let this conversation resonate a bit further. Think about this. Perhaps the ultimate aim isn't simply about achieving personal success or ticking off accomplishments on a list. Maybe it's about something far more profound, bringing honor to the divine in every aspect of your life and living in a way that consistently reflects love and grace through what we could call a continuous rhythm of discernment, that ongoing intentional cycle of prayer, observation, thoughtful analysis, and then purposeful action.